My daughter sent me a text that said, "Please don't come to the wedding, Dad. Bradley says it's better this way." I read it twice, standing in my own garage with grease still on my hands from the truck I'd been fixing since 5 that morning. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I set the phone down on the workbench, wiped my hands on a rag, and made one phone call that froze every account those two people were quietly living off of. By sunrise, my phone had 94 missed calls on it, all from the same two people who thought they'd already cut me loose. My name is Mitchell Cole. I'm 61 years old, and I've run coal plumbing and heating out of Tulsa, Oklahoma for 34 years, starting with one used van I bought off a man who was retiring and a toolbox that had belonged to my own father. I never had a business degree. I never had an inheritance. What I had was a daughter named Hannah, and after her mother left when Hannah was 9 years old, I had one job left in this world that mattered more than any other, and that was raising that girl right. Before I get any further into this story, I want to ask you something, because I have a feeling a lot of you already know this feeling better than you'd like to. Have you ever given everything you had to build a soft landing for someone you love, only to be told, in the end, that you were the embarrassment standing in the way of their new life? Tell me down in the comments, because I think you're going to see yourself somewhere in this story. And if these kinds of stories mean something to you, stick around and consider subscribing, because there's more of this coming. Raising Hannah alone wasn't the kind of thing anybody wrote a country song about, not really. It was quieter than that. It was learning how to do a French braid from a video I watched on my lunch break, sitting in the cab of my truck. It was sitting alone at parent-teacher conferences while other kids had 2 chairs filled across the table. It was knowing that she hated cooked carrots and loved thunderstorms, and that she cried at the end of every single movie, no matter how many times she'd already seen the ending coming. I built coal, plumbing and heating with her in mind, every single day. Every truck I bought, every guy I hired, every contract I signed, all of it was so that one day my daughter would never have to lay awake doing math on a napkin the way I did when I was young, broke and scared. By the time Hannah turned 26, we had 6 trucks on the road and 14 guys working for me. And the Cole name meant something in 3 counties around Tulsa. I'd built something real with my own 2 hands. And none of it ever mattered to me, the way people assume money matters to a man. I didn't want a boat. I didn't want a lake house. I wanted my daughter to have a floor under her feet that would never give out. I paid off her student loans the year she graduated without her even having to ask. I helped her get into a decent apartment. I made sure the car she drove had good tires and airbags that worked, not because I was trying to buy her affection, but because that's just what a father does when he's spent his whole life building something for one person. Hannah met Bradley Kensington a little over 2 years ago at a work function downtown. His family ran a commercial real estate outfit that had its name on half the new buildings going up in the city. And the first time she brought him around for Sunday dinner, she was glowing in a way I hadn't seen from her in a long while. I shook his hand, firm grip, good eye contact, all the right words about respecting a man who built something from nothing. I liked him fine at first. I wanted to like him. I wanted, more than anything, for my daughter to have found somebody who'd treat her the way she deserved. But there were little things early on that I let slide because I didn't want to be the overprotective old man standing between his daughter and her own happiness. Small comments about how he grew up around real money, said with a laugh that never quite reached his eyes. Mentions of his father's downtown office and his mother's charity board seats dropped into conversation a little too often around me, like he needed me to understand exactly where I stood next to his family. Hannah never seemed to notice, or if she did, she'd already decided it didn't matter because she was falling fast, and when you're falling that fast, you don't want anybody pointing out the cracks underneath you. Bradley proposed on the rooftop of one of his family's own buildings, skyline lit up behind them, And when Hannah called me that night crying happy tears, I felt nothing but joy for her, the kind of joy that erases every quiet worry you've been carrying around. I told her right then I'd pay for the wedding, every bit of it, no conditions attached, because that's simply what a father does for his only daughter. It didn't stop at the wedding. A few weeks later, Bradley sat across from me at my own kitchen table and laid out a plan to break off from his father's company and start his own development firm. He needed $110,000 in startup capital. I didn't hand that over blind. I've run a business for 34 years. I know the difference between a real plan and a pretty story, and his numbers looked solid enough on paper. So I told myself I was investing in the man who was going to take care of my daughter long after I was gone. On top of the wedding and that loan, I signed the mortgage on the house they wanted in Broken Arrow, because Bradley's income on his own, fresh off leaving his father's firm, wasn't quite enough yet to qualify without my name attached. In the span of about 5 months, my name and my money were tied into nearly every major decision in their new life together. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the business loan, the mortgage. I didn't see it as control. I saw it as love, the same kind of love that had me working 60-hour weeks 20 years earlier, just so Hannah could have new shoes before the school year started. I was about to learn just how differently Bradley's family saw all of it. Once the wedding planning got underway, things started shifting in a way that put a knot in my stomach. Bradley's mother, Vivian, inserted herself into every decision, the venue, the guest list, the seating chart, and somehow every conversation I tried to have about a wedding I was paying for got quietly redirected around me. Hannah started saying things like, "Bradley's family has a certain way they like things done." Whenever I asked a simple question about the budget, I paid every deposit without complaint, because I wasn't trying to buy control over my daughter's big day. I just wanted to be part of the day I was funding. At a tasting dinner in the spring, Bradley made a joke in front of his parents about how his father-in-law probably thought sparkling water was fancy enough to count as champagne, and the table laughed, and Hannah laughed along with it. Something in my chest went cold and quiet in a way it hadn't in years. I told myself weddings make everybody a little crazy, that stress brings out strange behavior, and that once it was over, things would settle back to normal between us. But the little comments kept coming about my truck, about my work boots, about how I still smelled like a job site even freshly showered. Hannah stopped shutting those comments down the way she used to. She used to be the first one to defend her old man. Now she just went quiet, or worse, smiled along, like she didn't want to rock the boat with her new family. By early June, 3 weeks out from the wedding, I'd paid over $80,000 toward the venue, the catering, the florist, and the band, and I still hadn't been given a single real role in the ceremony beyond writing checks. Bradley's father was giving the toast. Bradley's mother was walking the bridal party through some tradition from her side of the family. I asked Hannah gently, over the phone, if I'd still be the one walking her down the aisle, and there was a pause on the line long enough to answer the question before she even said a word. "We're still figuring out logistics, Dad," she said. And something about the word logistics coming out of my daughter's mouth, about her own father walking her down the aisle, nearly broke something loose in my chest right there. I let it go. I told myself I was overreacting, that she still loved me the same way she always had, deep down, even if she was distracted by a man and a family who clearly wanted less of me around and more of my money flowing in. I kept paying every invoice that landed in my inbox. I kept making sure Bradley's business account had breathing room through his loan during its shaky first year. I was holding up their entire world financially while slowly being erased from it emotionally, and I didn't fully understand how far that erasing would go until one message landed on my phone at 6 in the morning, 4 days before a wedding I had paid for in full. That morning I was in the garage before sunup, same as always, elbow deep in a customer's water heater I'd promised to have fixed Before my first appointment, my phone buzzed on the workbench, and I figured it was one of my guys calling about a job. Instead, it was Hannah's name on the screen, and my stomach did something strange before I'd even read the words. "Please don't come to the wedding, Dad. Bradley says it's better this way. He doesn't think you respect what we're building, and he doesn't want tension in front of his family." I'm sorry. I stood there in that garage and read it 3 times, slow, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. My own daughter, the little girl I'd raised alone for 17 years, the woman whose wedding I'd paid nearly $90,000 for, whose fiancé's business I'd funded with a piece of my retirement, whose mortgage carried my name and my credit, was telling me to skip her wedding because her fiancé didn't want tension. I felt something in my chest, close, quiet, and final, not a slam, just a door easing shut. I didn't call her screaming. I didn't text back begging to be let back in. I wiped my hands on the rag hanging from my belt, and I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I smiled, not because any of it was funny, but because for the first time in months, everything finally made sense. I understood exactly where I stood with those 2 people. And more importantly, I remembered exactly what I still controlled in their entire financial life together. Every account, every loan, every dollar moving through their world still had my name on it, and none of it had gone anywhere yet. I didn't act out of anger, because anger makes a man sloppy, and I never once in 34 years of running a business let anger make a decision for me when real money was on the line. I finished the water heater, drove home, sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and thought it through with a clear head, the same way I'd think through any contract that could make or break the company. Here's what I knew for certain. The wedding fund sat in a joint account Hannah and I had opened together, with me as the primary holder, since she hadn't built up enough credit history yet to open one on her own. The startup loan to Bradley's development firm wasn't a gift. It was a signed private loan with a on-demand clause my own lawyer had insisted on, because 34 years in business teaches a man to protect himself even when he loves the person he's lending to. And the mortgage on the Broken Arrow house had my name as co-signer, which meant I had rights tied to that loan that Bradley clearly hadn't thought all the way through before deciding I wasn't welcome at his wedding. I called my lawyer, a steady woman named Renee Ashby, who'd handled Cole Plumbing's contracts for over a decade, and I told her exactly what I wanted done. Freeze the wedding account, call the loan due in full, begin the paperwork to pull my name off the mortgage. By noon, every call had been made, every form signed, and the entire financial foundation Bradley and Hannah had been standing on for the last 5 months had quietly, legally come apart. The venue called Hannah first, said the balance hadn't cleared, and without full payment inside 48 hours, they couldn't hold the date. The caterer called next, then the florist, each one polite but firm. Bradley's brand new firm, barely 5 months old with more overhead than income, had no way to produce $110,000 on short notice, and 3 different banks turned him down flat over the following 2 days. The mortgage lender sent formal notice that the co-signer had begun withdrawal proceedings, which meant the monthly payment was about to be reassessed on Bradley's income alone, an amount, according to the lender, he could not currently carry. 2 days later, on what was supposed to be their wedding day, I sat at my own kitchen table and heard through a neighbor that the venue had gone dark. A handwritten sign taped to the locked door. Bradley's mother had apparently stood outside in her mother of the groom dress making frantic phone calls that went nowhere. I woke the next morning at 5:30, same as always, and found 94 missed calls stacked on my phone, 30, 1 from Bradley, 60, 3 from Hannah, along with a string of messages that started confused and angry around midnight and turned soft and desperate by 4 in the morning. The last one, sent at 5:10, read, "Daddy, I don't care about the wedding anymore. I care that I hurt you." I was so afraid of what his family thought of us that I forgot what it felt like to just be loved by you. "I'm sorry." Please don't give up on me. I made coffee and let the phone sit quiet on the counter a while longer, because I've learned the calm has to come before the conversation, or the conversation goes nowhere good. Around 7, I finally called her back, and her voice came through thin and shaking, nothing like the woman who'd sent that first text 4 days earlier. I told her the truth, plain and steady. I never needed a seat at that wedding to prove I was her father. I needed her to remember I already was one, every single day for 17 years, long before Bradley ever decided my work boots made me less than his family. It took 2 months of hard, honest conversation before things settled into something real again. Bradley sat across from me at my kitchen table, no lawyers, no parents, and owned up to letting his mother's opinion carry more weight in his head than it ever should have. I restructured the loan on fair terms, once he proved he meant it. I kept my name on the mortgage, but only after Hannah started coming by on Sunday afternoons again, just to sit and talk, the way we used to before any of this started. The wedding happened 4 months later than planned, not in the glass, walled venue downtown, but in my own backyard under the oak tree Hannah used to climb as a girl. No ice sculptures, nothing that would have impressed Vivian Kensington, though she came anyway, and to her credit, kept her opinions to herself that day. When the music started, and Hannah took my arm to walk toward the arbor I'd built out of old fence boards, she whispered, "Thank you for coming, Dad." And I told her the same thing I'd been carrying in my chest for months. I never left, you just couldn't see me for a while. If this story meant something to you, tell me where you're watching from down in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like Mitchell and Hannah's. I'll see you in the next one.